Okay, today we're going to start on Memches Amud Aleph. It's about the middle of the page. Tani Reb Chanina Tirsa. Reb Chanina Tirsa. Okay. Thank Hashem that they're able to learn Torah every day. It's because of our learning. We should have the base of English immediately.
Right.
So Tani Reb Chanina Tirsa. Reb Chanina comes from a city of Tirsa. So he taught Kamei de Reb Yochanan. It's going to be significant. He's apparently a student of Reb Yochanan. And he says like the Shachar Arba Kvasim Al Shnei Chalas Umeshich Shnaimim. We're talking about the Karbanos of Shavuos, and we have it's supposed to be 2 lambs together with 2 loaves of bread. This Kayanim that are in the Beis Hamikdash at that time, they brought 4 lambs instead of 2 lambs. So what should they do? It's going to go through the options, but meanwhile it says what you do is Moshech Shnaimim. You take 2 of those 4, and then you take those two of the 4 and you sacrifice them for the wrong intention, which means for shlamim, and then you're left with another 2, which is everything is perfect, and then the other ones you do lishma shimi ataymerkain, because if you do it the opposite way, there's two versions in Rashi. What the if you don't say this is. And you do it the other way, then hifsadata achron, you're going to lose the last ones. Now, the explanation for why you would lose the last ones is because anytime you have a sacrifice that's eligible, but then becomes rejected, so it becomes rejected entirely. So even if you would offer them first, lishma, the sacrifice is done properly, and then the second 2 are already rejected, and so even if you would bring them shlei lishman, it would still be invalid. That's one version of Rashi. Rashi's other version is.
And that's different from last time from the loaves.
What would you mean?
Because the loaves, I think it said that they could do that.
Loaves, we said 40 out of the 80. What did we say? You take 2 and you waive them, and the other ones are redeemed. The other ones are redeemed. Yeah, but here we're not going to be able to.
Don't have that option.
Maybe you could redeem it with a mum, but it's more complex. So whatever the case is, okay. So I only told you one version of Rashi because Shemiyat Aimerkain was saying that if you would do it in the opposite order. Rashi's other version is that if you would do all 4 for the right intention, for the sacrifice of the Shavuos sacrifice, then 2 of them are going to be invalid. One pshat in she'im iyat aimerkin, if you do not say so. What do you mean if you don't say it? And instead you say what? So one version of Rashi is if you do it the opposite order, if you do first the kosher one and then afterwards you do it not, so you've already rejected it and then it's invalid. The other option is shemiyat aimerkin, if you don't do first the ones that are not kosher, rather you do all of them kosher, all of them for the sake of this of the correct sacrifice, then it's going to be invalid. 2 of them are going to be invalid.
They don't allow you to do more because of the Torah that you can add to it. Because it would seem like it's okay.
No, it's once the sacrifices are brought, then it's not necessary to do. It's going to be totally it's going to be totally extra, so it's going to be invalid. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan says, what you're doing here is you're starting off doing the wrong sacrifices in order to be able to allow the other ones to be kosher, right? So Amalei Rabbi Yechanan says back to Reb Chanina Tirsa, he says, do we tell someone to do a sin so that something else should be eligible? Shetizka, so that we should be able to have the sacrifices each, and basically, if you do it the way he's suggesting, then you'll be able to eat all the sacrifices. The ones that are done shalei lishma, you'll eat because it's considered a shlamim, right? And and the kosher ones will be kosher, so you'll be able to have those as well. So he says, is that what we do? We tell them to make a sin because to change from one sacrifice to another is considered a sin. We do a sin just to be able to rectify the situation. So we sin for that. So it says Vatanan, but I'll prove it to you that we don't do that because Ivari Chatas and Asarvu Beivari Oila. The limbs of a chatas go on the altar, and the limbs of an oila also go on the oila. The imurim go on the entire oila is burnt. That's a burnt offering, and from the chatas only the organs go on the altar, but the rest of the limbs do not go on. Now Rebbe Lezer says if there's a mixture over here between these two sacrifices, a chatas and an oila, so chatas is supposed to go on the altar. I'm sorry, the oil is supposed to go on the altar, and the chatas is supposed to be eaten. Well, what are you going to do now? You can't eat it because the oil is not eaten. You can't just throw it on the altar because it's a chatas. It's not supposed to go on the altar. So Rabbi Lezer says, "Yitnu l'mayla." You put everything on the altar. Well, we'll just consider the chatas like it's wood. I know it's not supposed to go on the altar, but we're just going to use it as fuel to burn the other sacrifice. It's not put on the altar as a sacrifice. It's put on the altar as fuel for the other sacrifice. Chacham say tu b'tziras and yasel b'eses shreifa. Chacham say, you let it spoil, and then what happens if a spoiled sacrifice? You burn it. Now, whatever the case is, we're seeing that the Gemara says, "Amai, why do you have to do this? Lema amoid v'chatei lema amoid v'chatei b'shul shetizke. Why do you burn it? According to the Chachamim, let's put it on the altar. Why don't you put everything on the altar, even though it's not supposed to go on the altar? But at least the oila will be able to. Otherwise, you're going to lose out on the oila as well. We said that we don't want to. That it's better to do a sin so that you don't lose out on the other sacrifices that are eligible. Right? So we'll do the same here. We'll do a sin so that we don't lose out on the sacrifices that are eligible. The Gemara answers, one second, it's not a perfect comparison because Amoid v'chatei b'chatas b'shul shetizka b'chatas. We would be willing to make a sin for the sacrifices that are being brought, so that those sacrifices themselves should be edible. What's the sin? We're going to take sacrifices that are supposed to be shalmi tzibur, and we're going to sacrifice them as regular shlamim. Over here they're called chatas because in our parable we're comparing them to a chatas and an ayla, but back in the nimshal, back in what it's compared to, we're dealing with the shalmi tzibur, and that are being shechted for a regular shlamim. So we'd say if those karbanos need to be eligible themselves, so we'll do something, we'll corrupt them so that we should be able to have them kosher, to be able to. But over here, what we're saying is, but amoid v'chatei b'chatas b'shul shetizke what are we going to do? You want to you want to commit a sin regarding the chatas, which is not supposed to go on the altar, just so that the oila offering should be able to go on the altar. Is that we don't do? We don't sin for this one, so that one should merit. Okay. So now the Gemara challenges even what we just said. We said that sometimes we will accept to corrupt the sacrifice in order to change the way it's supposed to be, in order so that it should be eligible, right? So sometimes we do that. The Gemara asks, "Do you ever do that? That even in one matter, if it's the same sacrifice, we're going to bring it in the wrong way just so that we should merit." But Tanya, but we have a brisa that says the following: "Kivsi atzeres sheshachten shlei lishman." We're dealing with the same lambs of the Shavuos sacrifice, that if they were slaughtered for the wrong intention, or if they were slaughtered either too early or too late, before Shavuos or after Shavuos. So what do? There's a problem with these sacrifices. So Adam Yizarek, sprinkle the blood, Babasi Yachal, and then you can eat the flesh. What do you sprinkle the blood? You sprinkle the blood for the sake of a shlamim. Okay, so you change the sacrifice from a shalmi tzibur to just a regular shlamim, and then you can eat the flesh. Shabbos, let's say it was on Shabbos, when Shavuos was on Shabbos, and the sacrifice was slaughtered shlei lishman for the wrong intention. So lo yizrek, you can't sprinkle the blood, because what type of sacrifices are brought on Shabbos? Only karbanos tzibur, only community sacrifices. And when you change the intention of the sacrifice, you basically change the sacrifice. So now that you change the sacrifice, it's not a community sacrifice anymore. You can't bring it on Shabbos. So you can't sprinkle the blood. However, im zarak, if you did sprinkle the blood, hurtza, the sacrifice is acceptable. Hurtza lahakter ha'imurim la'erev. And you're able to offer the limbs, the organs that go up on the altar that evening after Shabbos, because every sacrifice is always a day and a night, at least, right? It could be even more, but if it's a regular shlamim, 2 days and a night. Whatever the case is, on Shabbos, we're not going to burn a sacrifice, the parts of a sacrifice that were not eligible for that Shabbos. Turns out you ended up doing it. You sprinkled the blood, but we tell you not to do it. If you did it, then the sacrifice is going to be kosher. Second, we said that if it's for the same sacrifice, we'll say that you can do a sin in order to make that sacrifice eligible. But nevertheless, we're saying that don't sprinkle the blood on Shabbos, and we're just going to let the sacrifice go to waste. If you sprinkled it, it's a different story, but we tell you not to. Question is, Amai, Lema Moin V'Chatei B'Shvil Shetizke. Why don't you sprinkle the blood on Shabbos so that you should be able to have the sacrifice? So the Gemara answers, Amai V'Chatei B'Shabbos K'dei Shetizke B'Shabbos Amrinan. Interesting answer. It says that if we would tell you to sprinkle the blood on Shabbos, and then you would be able to offer the sacrifice also on Shabbos, then we would do that. But because over here you're going to sprinkle the blood on Shabbos, and then you're going to offer the sacrifice, you're going to offer the organs on the altar after Shabbos, so that we're not doing, because that's really sinning for one thing to be able to have something else merit. That's Shabbos. I would have said it a little different, but the Gemara is not saying. I would have said that violate Shabbos in order to have a kosher sacrifice, that we're not going to do. We can violate a sacrifice to have the kosher sacrifice. But this is violating two different mitzvahs. This is violating Shabbos in order to have a kosher sacrifice. The Gemara is saying this is violating Shabbos in order to have an extra sacrifice in the weekday. Yeah. So that, whatever the case is, the same concept. But what we're learning is that we, just like we said before, that we would only say to sin in order that something has a merit. Hey, that's only if it's the same item, same sacrifice.
Man.
Okay. We're on page 48. So now we're holding the Gemara challenges. It says when it comes to two different sacrifices, we don't say that you can sin for one in order so that the other one should merit. We're talking about bringing a sacrifice for the wrong intention because you had too many, and that's why you use one for or you use two. But you take two, you use them you sacrifice them for the wrong intentions, so that the other one should be eligible, and so that these should also be eligible. But if it would be two different things, then you won't say that. Because you don't say to sin. To bring it for the wrong intention is to sin. And we had an example before where you don't uh, uh, corrupt one of the sacrifices so that the other one should be eligible. You don't bring the limbs of a chatas onto the altar just so that the oila should be on the altar. We said we didn't, according to the chachamim at least. So you don't say this, but take a look at, we have a Mishnah. Chavis shel truma shenishbra begasel yaina tachtena chulin tmeim. So you have a very difficult situation. You have truma, that's a barrel of truma that broke, and it's coming down the pipes, coming into the lower vat in the press, and it's going to pour into a collection of chulin that's tamei, mundane wine that's tamei. So you have truma wine that's on its way down the pipes coming down into this collection of tamei chulin. Now, what happens if the truma that becomes tamei is not eligible? There's nothing you can do with it. Truma tamei, you burn it. There's nothing you can do with it. So you have an option. The option is to stop it before it comes down, to collect it into another bucket. Now, if you can collect it into another tahar bucket, then great. But let's say the only bucket that you have is a tamei bucket. What you'd be doing is you're being metamet truma biyadayim. You're directly by hand with your own hands. You're making truma tamei. Now the truth is, if you leave it, it's going to become tamei, and not only is it going to become tamei, it's going to end up making everything invalid to eat, all the chulin as well. So there would be a financial benefit to grabbing it beforehand. And even though you may be making a tummy, but it doesn't mean that that's what you're supposed to do, because you're doing it by hand is worse than just letting it become tummy on its own. So the Gemara says like this: that's your predicament. So the Gemara says, "Meider Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua Shemiachal Lahatzel Mimena, Revius Betara Yatzel." That both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua say that if you're able to salvage even one revius, that you take a cup, and to catch a little bit of the truma, then good, you do that. However, vimlav, but if you can't do that, then there's a machlaikas. Rabbi Lezer says on the top of Mem Chesamid Beis, Teiret v'tetama v'al yatamenu biyad. Rabbi Lezer says that let it go down, you don't touch it. It's going to become tamei, it's going to ruin everything, but that's better than you interfering and making it tamei directly. Rabbi Yeshua says, af yatamena biyad, you can even make it tamei. Now, why are you doing that? Why are you making it tamei? Not for the truma's sake. You're making it tamei to save the chulin. That means that we're allowed to do a sin in order to save something else. Do a sin to save something else. The Gemara answers, we're not considering that a sin, because if you let it go down, it's going to become tummy anyway. So therefore, this is not really considered a sin. Yeah, but actually, to do a sin that something else should be saved, that we're not going to do. There's a famous Rashba about a girl that was taken captive. They wanted to baptize her, and were you allowed to be Michal Shabbos to save her? Yeah, it's a discussion in the Rashba.
Wait, the Jews or the Jew? Who cares if they're baptized?
Yeah. Maybe it meant that she would end up becoming not Jewish. Were you allowed to be Michal Shabbos to save her from from from
What could be the answer to that?
what could be the answer? The question is that it's your sin to save someone else's religion. Are you allowed to sin to save someone else's religion? Not for pikuach nefesh, of course, you're allowed to. But are you allowed to sin to save someone else?
Even for the life saving is for them to keep more Shabbos. This is not the case. Maybe it doesn't work, no?
No, maybe this is to help someone else keep more Shabbos, right? But are you allowed to sin to help someone else keep more Shabbos?
Brothers.
Right?
Big brothers.
Would say yes.
Oh, yeah, I think go.
To save the girl from probably we're talking about a time when if she would have converted, she wouldn't have been allowed to go back to the community. You know, there was when the government was religious, and they wouldn't let her. Okay. Ki asa Rav Yitzchak. When Rav Yitzchak came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Tani, he taught. Kivsei atzer sheshachtan shleikim mitzvasan. Psulin. If there were two interpretations here. The lambs that we're talking about, the lambs of Shavuos that were slaughtered for the wrong intention. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation, Rashi goes through in this Gemara throughout the entire Gemara. Rashi goes through explaining it according to both interpretations. The other interpretation is that they were supposed to be within the first year. However, you brought them in the second year. So, because it says shalei ki mitzvasan, not according to their mitzvah.
Right.
So, what does it mean? Not according to the mitzvah? It doesn't mean the wrong intention. It doesn't mean the wrong. Something else was wrong. So, the other interpretation is what else would be wrong? Would be it was the wrong year. It was the wrong age. So, what do? It says it's puzzle. The two b'tirasan. You let it sit overnight. We've had that expression before. You let it ruin its form. But yetzel beis hasreifa, and then you burn it. So the community sacrifice was messed up, and so you just leave it overnight and then you burn it. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, what happened over here? He brought it for the wrong intention, possibly, or it was the wrong age. My demakish lu lechatas. You're comparing these community sacrifice, community shlamim, shalmei tzibar, you're comparing it to a chatas, so therefore tani psulim, because what's the rule by a chatas that's brought for the wrong intention? It's pasul. All sacrifices that are brought for the wrong intention are kosher, except for two, the chatas and the korban pesach in its time, on Erev Pesach. But all other sacrifices are kosher. This is a community shlamim. It should be kosher, right? It says no. We're comparing the community shlamim has its unique halachas. We're comparing it to a chatas. Pasuk says, "V'asisem sir hizem echad lechatas u'shnei kvasim b'nei shana lezevach shlamim." Because in the pasuk, the korban right next to it is a chatas, so we're comparing this to the chatas. Therefore, Tani Psulim, that's why you're saying that it's going to be pasul. However, Tana de Levi, but the yeshiva of Levi taught, the Gamar, they learned, Shalmei Chayva, Mishalmei Nedava. They do a comparison. Obligatory peace offerings are comparable to voluntary peace offerings. And just like voluntary peace offerings, if they're brought for the wrong intention, are kosher, so too, the obligatory peace offerings, the Shalmei Chayva, are also going to be kosher. Tani Ksherim, so Levi taught that if it's brought for the wrong intention, or if it would be the wrong age, it would be kosher. And now the Gemara says the Tani Levi, because Levi taught Shar Shalmi Nazir Shachten Shleik Mitzvasan. The Nazir has a bunch of different sacrifices, and one of those sacrifices are shlamim. So if they're brought for the wrong intention, they're going to be kosher, just like if it would be a voluntary shlamim. However, it doesn't satisfy the owner's obligation, and they're eaten for 1 day and 1 night. Just the rule by the Shalmi Nazir. It has a different law than a regular shlamim. It's more similar to the korban taida, which is eaten for 1 day, 1 night, even though it's also a shlamim. It doesn't. You don't have to do the other things that you would normally do if it would be a Shalmi Nazir. You would have to bring bread along with it, and you also have to give one of the front legs to the kayan. You don't have to do that with this.
They always bring up the Nazir's like sacrifice, and it seems like the Nazir's sacrifice is like more lenient. Like in the case that they could like slaughter it like anywhere else.
The Shalmei Nazir.
It's like every page they bring up the Nazir's sacrifice.
Well, I don't think the Shalmei Nazir was more lenient than all other sacrifices, right? Was it? It was a regular. It was a. What did we say? We have a siddur here. We say Hataydavel Nazir is kachim kalim shchitasam b'chol makom azara. So that's because it's a regular kachim kalim. The other sacrifices of the kachim kalim are also shchitasam b'chol makom azara. Only the chumrah of it is that it only has 1 day and 1 night to eat it. So it's more, in a way, it's more strict, right? It's a kachim kalim that has a different time frame. That's the okay. So what's our question? Let's say this is not a question. This is a proof that Levi holds that he's comparing a Shalmei Nazir, which is an obligatory shlamim, not a community obligatory shlamim, but an individual obligatory shlamim, to a voluntary shlamim. And if it's brought for the wrong intention, it's fine. Okay, so we're going to say the same thing when it comes to a obligatory shlamim, which is the Shalmei, the Shalmei Tzibur, the shlamim of the community, which is brought on Shavuos. Meisrei. Where's the question? Asham ben Shana. If there's an asham that's a year old, Karban, it's or within the first year rather. It's a asham that's being brought either because the nazir became tamei, or maybe it's a mitzaira. He brings a. There's how many types of asham are there? 5. Yeah. There's Hashem Gazelis, Hashem Elis, Hashem Shivcha Churuf, Hashem Nazir, Hashem Mitzvah. There's 5 types of Hashem, guilt offerings. We're dealing with the Hashem Nazir and the Hashem Mitzvah. The Hashem Nazir means that the Nazir became Tameh. He has to bring this carbon. So, mm. And it has supposed to be within its first year. Instead of doing that, Hevi ben Shtayim, he brought one that was within its second year, not its first year. Or ben Shtayim, Hevi ben Shana. Or maybe it was one of the other types of Asham Gazelis or Asham Eilis, which those were supposed to be in the second year, and he brought one that was in the first year, Hevi ben Shana. You did the wrong one. So it says Psulim v'tu v'tzirasim. It's puzzle. And you have to just let it wait overnight, and then you can yasel basis shafe, and then you can burn it. Aval oilas nasav oilas yeledes oilas mitzaira. Well, those are 3 sacrifices: the burnt offering of the nasa, the burnt offering of the woman that gives birth, the burnt offering of the mitzaira. Those were supposed to be in their first year, and they were brought b'nei shtei shanim in their second year. Ushchata, and then it's ksherin. That's just like another oila. An oila that's brought. It's interesting because what we're saying over here is that an asham is going to be compared to a chatas. If it's brought for the wrong age, it's going to be puzzle. The oila that's the wrong age is going to be kosher. Kolol shaldavar. The rule is kol kosher beilas nadava, kosher beilas chayva. Anything that would have been kosher if it would have been a voluntary offering, an oila could be brought as a voluntary offering, right? Could be a donation. So we're going to say that it's also kosher if it's an obligatory offering. Over here, these oilas are obligatory, and we're going to say that it's the same halacha as a voluntary. However, anything that would be invalid by a chatas is going to be pasul by the asham. Asham is always obligatory. Except by shalei l'shmai. So shalei l'shmai, is if it's for the wrong intention, the sacrifice is for the wrong intention, a different type of sacrifice, then that is possible by a chatas, but not by an asham. But the age is going to be possible by a asham, just like a chatas. The problem is, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, he said that a shlamim is going to be puzzle. A shalmi tibur is going to be puzzle because we're comparing it to a chatas. Why don't we just compare it to the oila or to another shlamim like we're doing in our Gemara? An obligatory oila was compared to a voluntary oila. So let's do a obligatory shlamim should be compared to a voluntary shlamim and should be kosher. The Gemara answers, Hi Tana de Beileviu. You're asking a question from a brisa, and you're asking a question on Rabbi Yitzchak, because Rabbi Yitzchak says that it would be invalid if it was brought for the wrong intention. It says that brisa was following the Levi that argues on Rabbi Yitzchak, and Levi held that if it was brought for the wrong intention, it would be kosher. And now you quote a brisa that says that, so you can't ask a question from this brisa. This brisa was a Levi brisa. Yeah. So that's why, but he was arguing on Levi. Tashima, so come and listen. The Tani Levi. Levi taught Asham Nazir, Asham Tzer, Shachtan Shalel Shman Ksherim, Leil Balam Shum Chayva, that if there was an Asham Nazir, the Nazarite that brings his Asham, or the Mitzvah that brings his Asham, and they bring it for the wrong intention, we say that it's kosher, and the owner doesn't. The owner doesn't fulfill his obligation because it was the wrong intention. That's the rule. He has to bring another sacrifice. Shachtan mechusar zman bebailim. Let's say they were slaughtered a little bit early. I'm sorry.
Wait, it says that they're valid. So what happens with other ones?
Valid. Valid means that the sacrifice could be eaten.
Oh, but he doesn't fulfill the obligation.
But the owner still has his obligation to bring the correct sacrifice. So, shachtan mechusar zman bebailim. Let's say it wasn't the 8th day. The supposed to bring. The Mitzvah is supposed to go through the whole process of the 7 days, and then he's slaughtering it too early. Or they were the wrong age. They were 2 years old instead of 1 year old. Ushchatan and Neshechten and Psulim, it's possible. Vim Isa, and if we're going to follow Levi, which this is Levi, says Ligmar Mishlamim. Why don't we compare it to the Shlamim? You see, the Asham over here is getting compared to a Chatas, which is very strict. Why don't we compare it to the Shlamim? Gemara says it's very simple. Shlamim mishlamim gamar, Asham mishlamim lay gamar. Because the Shlamim will learn from a Shlamim, and an Asham we're not going to learn from a Shlamim. Igamar Shlamim mishlamim. So it's 1 second. If that's the case, if you do learn a Shlamim from a Shlamim, so Ligmar nami Asham Asham. So why don't we learn an Asham from another Asham? And one of the cases over here was that it was the wrong age. So Asham Nazir, Asham Mitzayra, that were kosher if they're 2 years old, Asham Gazelis, Asham Eilis. We should say, I'm sorry, that they're kosher if they're within their first year. We should say that they're kosher because it's similar. We'll compare them to the other types of asham which are in the second year. Right? There's 5 types of asham. Some of them are the animal is within its first year, and some of them the animal is the second year. So we should learn an asham from an asham where another asham is kosher exactly in that situation. The Gemara answers. Or the opposite. Oh, Yashim Gzel Svashim Ilas, Yashim Nazar Vasham Mitzayra, which are kasha in the first year. The Gemara answers, Amar Rav Simi Barashi, done in Davar Shleibech Shere, Midavar Shleibech Shere, being done Davar Shleibech Shere, Midavar Shebech Shere. What we're doing is we're trying to compare a shlamim that's being brought in correctly, obligatory shlamim that's being brought in correctly, from a voluntary shlamim that was also brought in correctly. Just like by the voluntary shlamim that was brought in correctly, it's kosher b'di'evet. So too, the obligatory shlamim that's brought in incorrectly will also be kosher b'di'evet after the fact. And so we said, if that's the case, then we should compare an asham to another ashram. That if this ashram is supposed to be in its first year, and it was brought in its second year, at the age of the animal was its second year, so we should compare it to another ashram which is supposed to be brought in its second year, and it's of course valid when it's supposed to be. So the Gemara says over there you're comparing something that was done incorrectly to something that was also done incorrectly. You said that it was good, but over here what you're trying to do is you're doing something that was brought incorrectly. The ashram that was brought in the wrong year to something that's supposed to be brought in. That was to comparing it to something that's done correctly. That's not a good comparison. You have to compare mistake to mistake. Okay. The law says you can't compare a mistake to something that was done correct. It says, but I'll show you that we do that sometimes. But Tanya, you have a brayso that says, "Minayin liyotzei shema Allah layered." Shariyotzei kasher bebama. Says that if an animal that left the temple grounds and was brought back in and it was put on the altar, so we say you don't take it off the altar. Why? Because there are cases where that would have been eligible, and that would have been eligible at the time when altars outside the temple were allowed. There were times during the different temples, right, that you were allowed to bring a. So when you brought it outside the temple, was that a mistake or was that correct? So during that time, that was correct. And nevertheless, we're learning now that why don't you take it off the altar? Because of the times when doing that would have been correct. So it means you're not learning mistake from mistake. You're learning mistake from something that was correct. You see? Okay, so Gemara says...
We learned from this that if you owe Torah to show, you don't come back. Yored.
You came back.
No, I mean, if you make the...
Make aliyah. He wants to make aliyah. Tana zeis teres ayla riba samachlei. What we're saying is... We're saying... You made aliyah? No, so what are you doing here? Business or shidduch. What are the to study Torah? I think it says there's you can leave for a shidduch or to study Torah.
Yeah, there is a thing. Might be wrong.
Shem
Because of the whole thing. But
We don't have a reason for that. We have only send that to guys work to them. We don't have other. So anyway, what the Gemara is answering here is that that it's not really relying on that there were times when that you could bring a sacrifice outside the temple. Actually, we have a pasuk for it. We were just saying in as a way to remember the halacha that there were times you could bring it outside the temple. But really, there's a pasuk that says Zeis teres ha'olah, that says anything that from that pasuk we learn that anything that goes on the altar you don't take it down. So, but it wasn't the comparison to the bama, right? To that those times when it was eligible to bring sacrifice outside the temple.
Backyard barbecues.
What is that?
Kosher backyard barbecues.
Tani Rabba Bar Bechana Kamid Rav. Rabba Bar Bechana was actually a cousin once removed from Rav, and he teaches. He says over a mission in front of Rav, a brisa. It says Kivsei Atzeres Sheshachtan L'Shum Elim Ksherim. If the sacrifices that were brought on Shavuos, the lambs of Shavuos, which are brought together with the breads, they were sacrificed instead of for the kvasim. There were two kvasim, but there were also two rams. And you took that. You see the difference between a keves and a ram is just 1 year. It's a birthday, right? The kvasim are in the first year, and the elam are in the second year. So when he took them, he thought that they were the rams, which are just a year older. So, and there were two rams that were brought. So we say that ksherim, it's kosher, but you have to bring them again. Doesn't satisfy the obligation. Amalei Rav, so Rav says back to Rabbi Bar Bechana, to his cousin, he says olive. They actually do satisfy the obligation. Yeah, they brought for the wrong intention, they satisfy the obligation. Amar Rav Chisda comes along and he elaborates, Mistaber Milsa de Rav, that what Rav said is probably correct, B'kesavar elim v'shachtel l'shem kvasim. See, very interesting. What were they really? They were really lambs. He thought they were rams, and he slaughtered them with the wrong intention of his own mistake. He was actually slaughtering them with the correct intention, but he was making he made a mistake about his mistake. He had thought that they were really lambs. He thought that they were rams, and thinking that they're rams, he shechted them as if they're lambs. So he made a mistake on his mistake, which put it back into its original. So Rab would say it's correct.
So that's not even the pigul. That's just
No, pigul would be at the wrong time,
intention.
the wrong time, out of the allotted time. Here, he thinks it's a different sacrifice because there's other sacrifices that were brought on the same day that were rams. So because shari kvasim l'shem kvasim nishchatu, because lambs were slaughtered for the sake of lambs. Ultimately, at the end, if you drop the mistake in the middle, they're actually lambs, and they were slaughtered for the sake of lambs. Aval kasavar elim v'shachtim l'shem elim la yatsa la. Then you're not yatsa. If they he thought they were rams and he slaughtered them as rams. In other words, he held on to his mistake. He didn't make a double mistake. He just made one mistake. He thinks they're rams and he slaughters them for rams. Then you're not yaitze. Why? Because akira betos havi akira. Rav would hold that when he's oikarit, even though he's mistaken about this, but that's considered an akira, and he ruins the status of the sacrifice. An akira means to uproot it. He uproots it from its status, and now it's not considered the lambs; it's considered the rams, and he slaughtered the rams. Rabba says, akira b'tois layavi akira. When you make a mistake about something and you uproot it from that, it's not considered uprooting, and it still considers the same.
He should say akira lo have yakira.
What is the akira?
Recognizing. Recognize what it was.
You'll see that in a moment. Very good. Okay.
Not just a pretty face.
Not just pretty.
Not just another ram.
Amar Rava says, actually, some versions of this are Rabba, because it would be it's definitely continuing Rabba's theory over here about Akira B'tos. So it's either Rava explaining Rabba or it's actually Rabba. So it says like this: Amar Rabba, Misvin Nashmaitin. We asked on our halacha that we said, Hakayinim shepiglu b'mikdash. If Kayinim have thoughts about a sacrifice that they have, that they were going to eat it out of the allotted time, they extended the time when it was really allowed. Mezidin chayafin. If they did it on purpose, they have to actually pay the owner for what they did. This is although it's a hezek shein nikar, but if it's done on purpose, it's different. In intentional, a lot of times we say like grama ben azakin is pater. Like if it's you caused an accident, but you didn't actually you caused the damage, you didn't actually do the damage. But when it's intentional, sometimes that law can change.
That requires a little honesty.
I'm sorry?
You have to be honest.
Yeah, well, maybe you can tell, but the exemption would be, when it's done, it wasn't intentional anyway, and it didn't even do it directly. If someone damages someone else and he doesn't do it intentionally, he has to pay, right? Even if it's not intentional, he still has to pay if there was negligence. If there was negligence. Here we're saying that if it's done intentionally, he has to pay for it. Shaygigin, but we're medayek. But if it was unintentional, then it's peturit. Then they're exempt. They're exempt from paying. But Tani Allah, we learned in a brisa, pigul and pigul. Nevertheless, even though it was unintentional, nevertheless it's still pigul. Now, when we use the word unintentional, it seems like what we're saying is that if it would that they made a mistake. Unintentional means that they made a mistake. Now, this is going to be a problem with Rabbah because Rabbah says that when you had the wrong intention, the mistaken intention, you don't really uproot it. Like that intention doesn't count because it was an absolute mistake. So the Gemara asks, "Hey Chidami, what was the case where you said that it was pigel, and we made a distinction between if it's on purpose or if it's unintentional?" Ilema chatasi v'kachashiv lo l'shum shlamim. Maybe what's happening here is it's a chatas, and he thinks it's a shlamim. So when he's doing the service, he's thinking that he has two days and a night to eat it instead of 1 day and night. So that's why it's becoming pigel. So if that's the case, hi shaygigin mizidinavi. 1 second. If he knows that it's a chatas, and he's intentionally thinking for a shlamim, that's not a shaygig. That's amazing. He's intentionally ruining the carbon. Elalav the kasavar shlamim hu v'machasheba l'shem shlamim. Rather, he thinks it's a shlamim. It's really a chatas, but he thinks it's a shlamim. Not that he knows that it's a chatas. He thinks it's a shlamim, and that's why he's considering it a shlamim. Uktani pigul and pigul, and nevertheless we say that it is pigul. So alma akira b'tos avi akira. Why does it become pigul? It's because akira b'tos, uprooting it by a mistake, is considered uprooting it. It's a kasha and rabbah. The Gemara answers. Amalei Abaya says, Li'olam, the Yoda, the Chatasi. Let's go back to our first case. First case was where he knew it was a Chatas. You asked, but that's not considered a Shaygig. If he's thinking that it's a Shlamim, if he knows that it's a Chatas and he's thinking it's Shlamim, you said, how could that be unintentional? He knows it's a Chatas and he's thinking that it's a Shlamim. That's very intentional. We said, no. Shlamim, Ba'aymer Mutter. This is a case called Aymer Mutter. I thought it was allowed. I thought I was allowed to think whatever I wanted. I didn't know. You didn't tell me. I didn't read the Kayan handbook that after you have to watch a video before you bring a sacrifice and say click that you attest that you watched the whole video. So he said I didn't know. I didn't get to all the information there. So Aimer Mutter is considered a shaygig, right? That's our very common for us to have that case. Aimer Mutter. I thought it was allowed. There's even a case where someone kills someone, and he says, "I thought it was allowed." There's a Gemara Makos, I think, where it was Aimer Mutter. He's killed someone. He intentionally killed him, but it's still considered a shaygig because he said, "I thought it was allowed." So the explanation why he thought it was allowed is because the other person started first. That's he started. So people make up all types of things, right? Okay.
And he is considered like direct because he forgot.
Here it's considered a shaygig. It's unintentional. And nevertheless, it works. We're talking about something that it's not a mistake, but it's still unintentional. Yeah.
What did you mean he started first?
When someone starts a fight,
Like so.
You started it.
Abalo Hagecha,
You
I know,
started
but that doesn't mean you can kill him.
the guy's killing you and
No, I'm saying
self-defense?
he started first. He told me something.
It wasn't like use of force, like
Yeah.
endangering.
No, they're both in front of Rabbi Smith in the principal's office. It started.
Yeah,
I didn't break the luchas.
it wasn't me, right? That split the sea. Who took a stick and split the sea? Didn't know that on the kids' tape. There was a boy on one of the kids' tapes. There was this boy that got all his answers wrong. So they said, "Tell me, who took a stick and split the sea?" So he says, "I promise, Rebbe, it wasn't me."
By the way,
It's on the kids' tape. Wasn't it good?
The last 2 pages, just
Yeah.
it's a good ending. Otherwise,
Spoiler alert! Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it for us.
good book thing.
Don't spoil it.
Master Reb say, you want the next one?
Yes.
Twins?
The twins, yeah.
I know, wait.
Anyway, okay. Master Reb Zera. Reb Zera has a question. Reb Shimon Aimer, Kol Menachos Nikpsus Leosman Ksheres Leolo Lebailam Shum Chayva. This is actually this Gemara that we had, Akira B'Tos, was actually based on this Gemara that we had at the beginning of the Masechta. We had this sugya before. So it says, Reb Shimon says that any carbon mincha, which is a flour offering that the kmitza was done shalei lishman, it's going to be kosher. And it also works. What does it mean shalei lishman? Means it was done for a different carbon mincha. Yeah, it was a menachos is 5 different types of menachos. 5 is like a big number today. There's different types of menachos. There's the flat pan and the deep pan and the wafers and the oil and the there's all different types. So if he takes one mincha, he does the kmitza on it with the intention that it's a different one of the menachos. So Reb Shimon says not only is it kosher, but the owner fulfilled his obligation. Because the mincha is very different than a sacrifice. The explanation is let's say you say that it's a flat pan, and you're doing it's a flat pan mincha, and you're doing it for the intention of a deep pan. A deep pan is going to be much more soft because the oil sits in there. It's a loose. As opposed to the flat pan where it's going to dry out because it's on a like a griddle, right. So but it doesn't matter what his thoughts are because everyone can see that his thoughts are not correct. So, and the same thing would be chareva l'shum belula. If it's a dry mincha for a wet mincha, which means it has oil, everyone can see that it's dry. They see that there's no oil in it. So what are you talking about? So we just ignore his thoughts. So but by a sacrifice it's totally different because shchita achas l'kulan, kabbalah achas l'kulan, zrika achas l'kulan. The fact what you're doing and you're thinking that it's going for a different sacrifice, you have no way of knowing that just from the shchita, the zrika, the kabbalah. It's all the same. It's all the same thing. Okay. Echidami. What's the case where the mincha was done for the wrong intention? Do we say that he knew that it was a machavas? He knows what it is, and then he's doing kamitza with the wrong intention. That for the deep pan, he thought he knows that it's a flat pan, and he's intentionally doing it wrong. So ki masem mechichan mayhavi hamiaka ka'akale. 1 second, his intention. The Gemara is gonna flip this around in a moment, but we're thinking right here is that his intention is changing the type of mincha that it's supposed to be. Elalav, so we can't say this. It must be. We must say the kasavar marcheshes v'kamitz l'shum marcheshes v'ta. Really, it's a machvas. It's a flat pan. He thinks that this is not a flat pan. He thinks this is a deep pan, and so he's thinking about a deep pan. So it's a mistake. So the hacha who the ma'aseh mechichan Allah only in such a case that we would consider it ma'aseh mechichan, that we look at what's the action, what's the facts. We do a fact check. We look at the facts and we say that the fact is that it's a machavah, so it's fine. But haba'alma akira b'tas havi akira. But in any other case where we can't do the fact check, we would say that even though it was a mistake, we would say that it still is akira and it would be invalid. This is a kasha on Rabbah that says akira b'tos is le'avi akira. That if you make a mistake, you uproot it by mistake. It's nothing.
I realized the Kohanim were very busy doing all these korbanos, but we give an impression here that the korbanim, like the kavana, is like really minimal. Because we're constantly saying, they did this, we did think of this, they did this, they did that. Was it so prevalent? Because if so, if alakas kama v'kama, the average person, we're lucky he has any kavana. I'm just
Right.
These are our holiest people.
Right.
These are our priests.
Right.
Right, Bryce?
You're right. That's a good point. Amar le Abaya. Abaya says to him, Li'aylam the machvasi. Actually, he knows that it's a machavas. And the problem is, what we said before, if he knows that, so then it was an akira. And his intention is like totally different than what the fact is. The kamret, who cares that the facts are different? He was accurate. This is Rava Latamei. This is Rava following his own reason. Damar Rabba. Machshava de minkra pasal rachmana. Machshava de minkra pasal rachmana. When does thought have an influence? when you can't tell what the action is. And so therefore the machshava is going to determine what's happening. But when you can see clearly what's happening, then the thought is not influential, right? The action is the overrides the thought. That's it.
You could say actions maintain. You could say.
Right.
Maser hiya ikra.
Basically, what we come out to is that even if the person knows, we were thinking that if he knows that it's a flat pan and he was doing kmitza for a deep pan, you're saying that, well, you're oikeret. You say no. If it's a flat pan, you can't just be oikeret. You can't just uproot it from being a flat pan by thinking that it's something else.
Well,
The fact is, you see what it is. So the thought doesn't do anything.
that's deep chassid as well.
Okay. Next Mishnah. A little easier Mishnah. Yeah.
He has no idea what's going on.
Oh,
Go, can you repeat that?
ouch, like
Can you repeat that?
that dagger out of my check.
That's midin ein ma'akven es musafin le musafin ma'akven es atmidin. There's different types of sacrifices on a Yom Tov. Some would be the daily sacrifice, and some would be the musaf sacrifice. The tmidim are the brought every day. One in the morning, one in the afternoon, and the musaf was brought because it's a holiday. So what we're learning now is that the Gemara is going to adjust this a little bit, but let's say what we're learning is that if you bring one, it's that one is valid even if you didn't bring the other. The Gemara is going to adjust it to say if you brought one and before you brought the other one, and the order was changed, that's also acceptable. So, V'loya musaf makvin zeh and the different carbon musaf, they're not mak of each other. If you have a bunch of different carbonas for musaf, they're not going to be mak of each other. Lo yakrivu keves babiker, yakrivu bein arbayim. If you didn't bring the carbon tamid in the morning, it's okay. You can bring it in the afternoon. Amar Reb Shimon says, Eimasai bisman shayu anusim shaygigim. That's only if the reason why they didn't bring it in the morning was because of unpreventable circumstances or because of it was unintentional. But if it was intentional, then you can't bring it in the afternoon. If there were, so what did they do? We just have to wait for tomorrow.
Beyond control. Who determines?
I guess the best thing that was in the base of English. There were times when the Jerusalem was under siege and they couldn't get any animals. Remember, there was a Gemara, Baba Kama, I think, where the animal put its fingers in the wall. It was a pig. They put up a pig, and they were putting gold down, and they were pulling up a pulley, and it was an earthquake. Right. So
That's just like a bridge is out.
right. On that same tape, that kid's tape with the I promise Rebbe it wasn't me. So the Rebbe says, what are you going to tell me this time? That your bus got stuck on gum? On bubble gum? He says, no, this time it was Tangy Taffy. It's on that tape. The excuse is the...
Smart kid. You're going to be a lawyer one day, that kid.
Yeah. So... but if it's bisman okay, so then you have to wait for the next day. If the ketairis wasn't brought in the morning, the ketairis was also brought half in the morning, half in the afternoon. So what do? Yaktiru bin arbayim, you bring it in the afternoon. That's acceptable. Reb Shimon Shimon says, but you don't bring the half in the afternoon. You actually bring it all in the afternoon. So you bring a larger amount, double amount. Okay, now what comes out now is like a new topic it throws in here, that at the beginning of the Chanukas HaMizbeach says she'ein mechanchen es mizbeach hazav ala b'kteris hasamim. You can only do the Chanukas HaMizbeach with the golden altar was done with a offering that was brought in the afternoon with the entire amount. That's the chinuch of it. That's the way. That's the inaugural sacrifice that's brought on it. When it comes to the outer altar, you bring the morning sacrifice when it's a brand new altar. And also the table that was in the for the showbread was only brought it was introduced, it was inaugurated with the showbread on Shabbos. And also the menorah that was also introduced, that was inaugurated with lighting the 7 candles in the afternoon. The Gemara says, Reb Chia bar Avin me Reb Chizda. Chia bar Avin asked Reb Chizda the following question. Tzibur she'ein lam tmidim u'masafin. Let's say the community doesn't have enough funds for both sacrifices, the sacrifice of the regular sacrifice plus the musaf. Which one should you bring? Gemara says, Hechidami, you have it right? You have you have limited funds. Which one comes first? Which one has precedence? It takes priority. Hechidami. What's the case where you have this question? Do you say that we're talking about on Yom Tov, and you have tmidim that you have to bring today, and you have a musaf that you have to bring today? So pshita tmidim adif. Of course, the tmidim are more would take precedence. Why? Because tadaru mekadosh. The havalu tadaru mekadosh, because both of them are holy, right? And they're even extra holy because they're coming on a holiday. Why do you have a korban musaf? Because it's a holiday. It's not a holiday, it won't be a korban musaf. So it's a holiday. Let's say it's Shavuos. But on this holiday, the korban tamid is not just a regular korban tamid, but the korban tamid is a holiday korban tamid. Because the Gemara in Zvachim, I think we had said, what do you think that the holiday only affects the musaf and it doesn't add holiness to the korban tamid? The whole day is holy. So everything is holy on that day. Even the tamid is holy on that. So therefore, the tamid is going to take precedence because now it has 2 advantages. First of all, it's holy. Second of all, it's more frequent. Whatever's more frequent comes first. Ella tamid.
Same on Shabbos, which is holy.
Yeah, the same thing. Ella tamidim de lamachar masafin de idna. Rather, the question is like this: I have enough for today's musaf, but I won't have for tomorrow's tamid. And tomorrow is not a holiday. So tomorrow's tamid is just a regular not mundane, but it doesn't have the holiday status of its korban tamid. However, it does have the idea that it's more frequent. And today's musaf has the idea that it's more holy. So what's going to be? Do we say that the tamid is better because it's more frequent? Or maybe do we say the musaf should take precedence because it's holy? Amalei, Rav Chizda responds, Tanisua, we have a Mishnah that discusses this. The different sacrifices don't affect the validity of each other. They're not essential for each other. The Gemara says, Hey Chidami, what's the case? Ilema de Islay, are we talking about where he has both of them, Mulakadem, and the question is which one comes first? So Vatanya, Minayin Shlei Davar Kaidam Taman Shal Shachar, Tamalem Varachla Oila. Amarava Haila Vishena. We know that the Oila has to come first. So of course the Musaf can't come before the korban tamid. The Oila over here is talking about the korban tamid, was the Oila. The burnt offering was the korban tamid. So that can't be the question, which one comes first? So it says it must be Elipshita Delesle. It must be that we don't have. We don't have enough. It's not which one comes first, because we know which one's coming first. It must be that we don't have enough. The question is which one should we spend the money on? So now, if that's the case, if we're talking about that it's on the same day, Amai, why do we say that it's not Ma'akiv, Tadar Mekudesh, Tadar Adif? We know which one is going to come first. It sounds like not Ma'akiv means whichever one you want. But we know which one's going to come first because the korban tamid has both advantages of, first of all, that it's more holy. That it's not more holy, but it's holy. And it's also more frequent than the other one. So that would for sure come first. Elalav, it must be that the case is Dilamachar, talking about that it's tomorrow's. Talking about we have musaf for today, and we don't. If we do the musaf today, then we won't have the tamid tomorrow. If we do the tamid tomorrow, then we won't have the musaf for today. And we said, it means that you could choose whichever one you want. We now have an answer to the question of Rav Chia Baravin of which one do you do. The answer is you flip a coin, whichever one you want. Depends on whatever you want. You do whatever. Amar Abai, Amalei Abai. Abai says to Rav Chizda, Lailam Dislu Lakadim. No, you got it wrong. We're talking about where you have both. And the question is, can you do one before the other one, or this one before that one? We said, how could that be a question? How could that be even an option? Not the question. How could that be an option? We learned from Rava that the Talmud is always first. That's mitzvah balmu. That's just lechatchila. But the Mishnah is saying that if you happen to do the musaf first, the musaf was already acceptable. What's the halacha? Does anyone know? If someone davens musaf before shachris, comes into shul late, and he davens musaf, he says, "Oi, I missed shach." He comes in the middle of Kriyas Torah, and he stands up when everyone's davening musaf. He says, "Musaf, he didn't daven shachris." So he davened shachris, but does he have to do musaf again because he did the musaf before the shachris?
No.
No, from this Gemara, it would be clear that you don't have to do it again. I'm not paskening, but that's what it would be.
Well, issue with from one day to the next. If it's winter today and you're planning for tomorrow, you save it for tomorrow. That's all. Not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to do an action that would be preparatory action.
It's not considered an action.
I don't think it's considered hachana. You're preparing for tomorrow. I don't think that's considered preparing. You're just not,
It doesn't play here to do the mitzvah that you have in front of you.
That's a good question. Hill has a good question. Why doesn't the Gemara say that whatever's in front of you that's the main one? Famous Radvaz person is in prison, and they let him daven one tefillah in the year. You can daven one tefillah the year. Which one should you choose? Yom Kippur. What's the most important tefillah? And the Radvaz says you do the first one that comes your way, whatever it is, a mincha, ma'ariv, whatever tefillah that is. So why don't we say that over here? You're asking a good question. Tess. Let's see if they quote the Radvaz in the commentary.
Especially like if it's like time bound.
He has another kasha. The Shagasari has a different question. It says, "Ein safek meitzah midei vadai." Right now, I need to bring a carbon musaf. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Maybe we'll get another one. Yeah, what's going to be with that Radvaz though? I'm not saying that they're quoting it. Oh, 1 second. I'm not sure. Okay. Tashima, we learned in the Mishnah, so we're going to try to answer the question of what was it, Rav Chia Baravin, that which one comes first, the one that's more frequent or the one that's more holy? Tashma ein peichsen mishisha tzlaim hamavukarim. There was a room in the Beis Hamikdash, Belishkas Atlam, in the room of Lishkas Atlam, the chamber that had the sheep in it. There were always 6 sheep in there, and the reason is because you would check over the sheep before they were brought as a sacrifice. So you had 6. Kidei l'Shabbos l'shnei yom tovim shel Rosh Hashanah. Why 6? Because if there was Shabbos coming up, plus 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, that would be a 3-day Yom Tov, right? A Shabbos with 2 days. So then, because in Israel, the only holiday that's 2 days was Rosh Hashanah, because if they would come afterwards, and the next day would be Yom Tov, and they would still have to bring it just in case. So anyway, so they would need 6 sheep. Hey, Chidami. What's the case over here where you have 6 sheep? It says, Ilim the Islay. If we say that you have enough sheep for 3 days, so Tmidim Musafim Tuvavi, what are you talking about? It's 6 sheep. There's way more than 6 sheep for these 3 days because you have all the Musaf. All the Musaf, it's a lot more than that. Elalab, it must be the Leslie that you don't have enough. Shmaminat Tmidim Adifi. We're talking about that you only have enough for the carbon tamid, and that would be 6. So that means that you're not bringing it as a musaf, you bring it as a tamid. That means the tamid comes first. When it says leilam this, they know we're talking about when you have more. What it means is that you always have 6 sheep inside this room 4 days before they're slaughtered. Umani, in which opinion is this? Ben Bagbagi, this is opinion Ben Bagbag, the Tanya, Ben Bagbagaimer, Minayin Latamid, Shaton Beaker, Arba Yamim. How do you know that the carbon tamid needs to be examined? They would keep it to examine it for 4 days before the shchita, kainim shchita. Talmud Laimar Tishmru lahakrivli b'mayadai. You guard it to bring it to me in its time. Ulahalan, and there in another place it says Alon huaymer vayelachem lemishmeres arabasiyim. It says that you were supposed to take a sheep on the 10th of Nisan. This is when they were in Egypt. They would hold it for 4 days, and on the 4th they would tie it to the bed, right? And then on the 14th they would offer it. Mala alon ton bikar abayam kaidim shchita. Just like over there, they were examining it 4 days before they slaughtered it. Afkan ton bikar abayam kaidim shchita. Okay, so what we're saying is not that there were we're only offering the carbon tamid on Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah because we don't have enough. We're talking about no, you have enough. We're just talking about that you need to have it for 4 days because you have to examine it for 4 days. So have enough for 4 days means that today I need to have 6 because today I'm going to offer 2, and then tomorrow I have to offer another 2. So in order to have enough for the next 4 days, I need to have 6, and then tomorrow I'll buy another 2, so I'll also have 6. So you always have it 4 days beforehand. What are you telling me that there's 6? Shiva hava. You really need 7. The tzafra, the tlasa b'shamata, because you're going to need the day after the day after Rosh Hashanah on Tuesday morning, right? Because Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, Shabbos, right? You need the kabbanas for Shabbos which is 2. Sunday is 2. Monday is 2. That's 2 days Rosh Hashanah. Then Tuesday morning, you need a sacrifice also. So you really need 7. And then you can get another one later. But meanwhile, for the first thing in the morning, you're going to need a sheep over there. What do you mean? According to you, you need 8. Because what about Erev Shabbos? You're going to be offering one Erev Shabbos, so you're not going after the carbon to go buy another one. It's Erev Shabbos, right? In the afternoon, you have to bring a sacrifice. What's all like kasha? We're talking about that you brought the afternoon one already. How many are left? You only have 6 left. That's what we're talking about. Okay, so we're not going to count the carbon tamid of the Friday afternoon. But nevertheless, what about Tuesday morning? You're going to need another one. Rather, we're not actually talking about Friday, Shabbos, Sunday. I'm sorry, Shabbos, Sunday, Monday of Shabbos and 2 days Rosh Hashanah. We're just talking about any day of the year that you always need 6. My kedela Shabbos Rosh Hashanah. So what do you mean Shabbos and 2 days of Rosh Hashanah? Simona Ba'alma. That's just telling you a way of remembering that how many animals you need. That you need to have 6 animals. Okay, Dekanami, I'll prove it to you. Diktani kedela Shabbos. It's also precise. It says enough for Shabbos and 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Tani lish Shabbos vilishnei yom tayvim shel Rosh Hashanah. It says kedei means the amount of, but it's not actually. It could have left out the word Kedei. It says, it could have said for Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't say that. It says Kedei means the amount of. Shema Mina, we see from this that we're just talking about a random day, and we gave that as a simon to know how many. Let's leave it over here.
Woo! That's awesome.
Yeah, top of it.
That's great.
Top of 50 by the two dots. It says
That's so much.
Loi hikrivu keves babiker. If the animal wasn't brought in the morning, the lamb wasn't brought in the morning. Okay, have a good week, everyone. I'm gonna turn this off. Yeah.